Recording in progress. I think you have to accept it. Come sit. Yeah, come sit. Yeah, it's fine.
At the risk of sounding senile, what are we learning?
What are we learning? I'll tell you. I'll tell you in a minute. First, here, we have a guest in class. It's my mom.
Hello, everybody.
Yes. Mom, everybody. Hey, Arnold. Hello, Mark.
I have to learn something.
It's about time. Once every 85 years. Okay. Tov. We're going to do two things. The first one comes with a little background. Both have to do, one has to do with Bayit Rishon, Bayit Sheni, first and second Beit HaMikdash. And the second has to do with the topic that I mentioned briefly last time, which was, let me just go this, hold on, and here, which has to do with where the Aron, Brit Hashem, the Ark of the Covenant may be. So we're gonna look at two different things. Now, the first thing I had absolutely no intention of teaching until on Shabbat, I came across something by accident. I learned Rambam Yomi, daily parak from Rambam. I just started recently. And on Shabbat, I do it on my phone, I have an app. And hey, Harry, oh, he's not on yet there. How you doing, Harry?
Well, hi.
Hi. And because it was Shabbat, I needed to use a physical book. So I went downstairs into my father's study and I got the Rambam and I was reading it. At the end, I was flipping through. It's an older version. And I came across something I'd never seen before. It's a commentary on the Rambam and then it has a little section about Bayit Rishon and Bayit Sheni. So I started to read it. So I came across something that I want to share with you. The gist of what it is, I'm going to read it in a moment, but the gist is, we say that the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, which is what we just learned about, was because of Gilui Arayot, Shfichut Damim, and Avodah Zarah, the three big Averot. The second Beit HaMikdash was that even though they were good people, was Sinat Chinam, baseless hatred. And he has a little problem with that, and we're going to see an interesting conclusion he comes to. That's the first thing. We'll do that first. Let me just do a screen share. Share. Now, the quality of the print is not the greatest, so you'll kind of have to just bear with me here. Whoops. We're going to start from, let's see. No, not this. This next page or this page? Hold on one second. Sorry. Well, let me see what the picture looks like in the book. I happen to find it online also. The one that says, it is. This is it. Okay. I'm going to start over here. You see where I just highlighted the word Vihine? You see that? Okay. Tov. Vihine, I'm going to read and I'm going to translate some, not the entire thing. V'ruvei hakitot b'meshach bayit sheni, u'pirud halevavot ben ish hachevra. Hem shegarmu b'sheba'u zarim u'pashtu yedehem b'zvul. The fractious, the fact that Bnei Israel were so disjointed and they didn't get along, I know it's hard to believe because we all get along so well nowadays. That is what caused the non-Jewish people to be able to come in, and literally means to stretch their hand out against the Beit HaMikdash, but to destroy it. V'zehu shekivnu chazal bavli Yerushalmi, perakama diyuma, in Parshat Acharei, in Parak Acharei, Bayit Sheni shanu makirin bahem, v'chol vesed tova hayta bahem. That in the second Beit HaMikdash, it tells us in Bavli and Yerushalmi, the two different Talmuds, that there were good people. V'gam anachnu yadanu tzidkatam u'kedushatam. We also know of their acts of chesed. They were tzaddikim in some cases. V'nechrav, and it was destroyed. Rak asher shalta behem sinat chinam. That the reason the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed was because of Sinat Chinam, Hainu, which means Pirud alevavot min nekitot shonot. The difference is that people, that they really had fights and internal strife between different groups. Ad sheichniu atzmam tachat oromayim, למען יתגבר על פרושים, ומאז והלאה משלו בנו הרומאים. From that point on, after the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, we have been under the thumb of Rome. Not from then, but from the time all this division began, we have had all these problems to the point that they came in and destroyed our Beit HaMikdash. Again, we're talking second Beit HaMikdash. Uldati, and in my opinion, I forgot to tell you who wrote this. So there's a man named who's known as the Maharatz Chayes, who was an author. One of his most famous works was an introduction to the Talmud. He's in the 1800s. Brilliant Torah scholar who wrote I actually got it from my bar mitzvah, an English version of it, which is an introduction to the Talmud. And this is something that was appended to certain printings of the Rambam, which I never saw literally till yesterday. And again, he wrote this in the 1800s. Now he's going to give his opinion about this whole topic. Uladati, in my opinion, Zohi Gamken Kavanat Hashas. This is also the what it means in the Gemara. Shemikdash Sheni Nechrab al Yedei Sinat Chinam. That the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam. Umikdash Rishon lo have Sinat Chinam. And the Gemara asks in Yuma, you mean to tell me that in the first Beit HaMikdash there was no Sinat Chinam? V'aktiv, it says, Migurei el cherev haya et ami, elu bnei adam sheochlin v'shotim zeh im zeh, v'dokrim zeh et zeh b'charabot shonam. He said, the Gemara talks about in Yuma, it says that in the second Beit HaMikdash was Sinat Chinam, and that's why it was destroyed. First Beit HaMikdash, says the Gemara, you're going to tell me there was no Sinat Chinam? Wait a minute. Of course there was. It says that the same people who would sit and eat and drink together would stab each other with their tongues, meaning that they were mean to each other. Mishani, and the Gemara answers, Hahu b'nesi'ei Yisrael hu dahave. That only referred to the upper crust, the leaders of Am Yisrael in the time of the first Beit HaMikdash. V'lichora, so now the Maharatz Chayes says, wait a minute. Apparently, Ein teirutz hashas maspik. That's not a good answer. Oh, the Sinat Chinam was only among the leaders. The Av Sinat Chinam bein hanesiim, even though the Sinat Chinam, the baseless hatred, was only among the leaders, mikol makom midi Sinat Chinam lo napak. There was still Sinat Chinam. So what do you mean there was no, that the first Beit HaMikdash, there was no Sinat Chinam? Sure there was. Vanira kamo shekatav la'el mi'inyan hakitot bebayit rishon. He says, now he's going to make a comparison to what happened in this first Beit HaMikdash and the second. The people in Bayit Rishon would follow the lead of the king. For example, Yeravam, remember our dear friend Yeravam ben Nevat, Hitautam v'echati rabim v'egleya zahav. We know that Yeravam ben Nevat, and we saw this over and over and over, caused Am Yisrael to sin by having made those two golden calves, ubasiyat bamot, and also he made all these private altars. And they all followed him. Achav, in addition, another dear friend of ours, Achav, hinhig avodat habal v'nimshechu le'atzato v'lo himru et devaro. So Bnei Yisrael also followed another king, Achav, who was a horrible person, in his service of Baal. By Yehu, along came Yehu, good guy, ubitel avodat habal, and he removed the avodah zarah Baal. V'achzir chatat Yerovam v'shamu lidvaro. V'chen yad dvar noheg b'malchei Yehuda shayu etzlam tzadikim. So too, when it came to, remember that was Malchut Yisrael, the northern kingdom. When it came to the southern kingdom, to the Malchut Yehuda, they were their tzadikim. V'Hoshaphat, v'Chizkiyahu, v'Yoshiyahu. All these names should sound familiar to you because these are all the good guys at the end. Shebitlu bamot. They got rid of the bamot. Kol ha'am nahagu achreihem, and all the people followed them. Achaz u'Menashe, then the two other guys who were really bad. Achaz and Menashe, shechnisu tzara lebeit kodshei kodashim, v'sagru hamikdash. What they brought Avodah Zarah into the Beit HaMikdash, and they closed the Beit HaMikdash. Ha'am lo himru et rucham. The people did not follow that. Va'asa ushar malchei. Let me go to the next page. Just a minute. This is in JewishHebrewBooks.org, which I've mentioned many, many times. It's a fantastic website. Move you guys over here. Okay. מלכי יהודה השאירו את הבמות ונהגו כולם כן. הרי שענייני הדת לא היו נמסרים רק למלכים והנשיאים. We see that in the first Beit HaMikdash, that all the things were driven by the leaders. The people followed them, they didn't follow them, but the driving force in both Malchut Yisrael and Malchut Yehuda, the driving force was the leaders. And the people, the average common person, even though they sometimes served the Avodah Zarah, sometimes they didn't, but all this, the decisions were all coming from on high. Why did the people not on their own volition start with Avodah Zarah and other things? Because they were busy, they had lives, they had a house to keep, they had fields to work. He says, because all the pirud, all this division was happening at the top tier, and it wasn't happening among the people who were just the day-to-day grunts of Am Yisrael, that pirud, all the problems were happening at the top level, and not among the masses. It wasn't like it was a constant problem, even though we saw there was always Avodah Zarah problems, but it wasn't to the same extent that we may understand. That in the fact, it says that in the time of Yeravam, kulam natu acharav. In the time of Yeravam, they followed him. B'Shavron u'Varay Yisrael. Chutz pesel micha she'ha b'makom yuchad b'mei achav. I'm going to read in free translate. B'mei Yehu ne'kra l'gamrei chatat achav. So let's go. I'm going to jump down for a minute here. It's down here. וגברה השנאה בהעם עד שנחרב בית המקדש על ידי זרים. אכן, בבית ראשון ענייני האמונה היו מסורים רק להנשיאים והשרים, לא היה כלל שנאת הדת בין אנשי האומה, וזה ברור נכון לדעתי. He tells us like this. Let me just take it off a screenshot for a minute. He tells us like this. We have to be foolish to think that there was no sinat chinam in the first Beit, in the first Beit Rishon. Because of course there was. The Gemara even says that there was, but it was mostly, apparently, in the upper crust, the leaders of Am Yisrael. But it didn't filter down as much to the average person in the street. So whereas it was a disease, let's say, of sinat chinam in the first Beit HaMikdash, in the second Beit HaMikdash, it permeated the entire society. And the entire society was the exact opposite of the first Beit HaMikdash. In the first Beit HaMikdash, there was murder, there was Avodah Zarah, there was Giloy Arayot, all these terrible things we saw throughout Sefer Melachim. By the second Beit HaMikdash, remember, after Ezra and Nehemiah bring Am Yisrael back, a small part of them, and rebuild Beit HaMikdash, and we had the second Beit HaMikdash for a few hundred years. During that time period, things started going downhill among the people. So remember when we first started learning Sefer Shmuel, about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I'm sure you all remember, that one of the things I said back then, and I've said many times since, I've said this in school and with kids also, is that why do we learn Navi? I mean, something happened 3,000 years ago, so who cares? Okay, it's not like, you can't say, oh, it's Torah. It is Torah. It's Navi, but it's stories that happened 2,500 years ago. So you had this king and that guy, and this one did Avodah Zarah, and this one killed this guy. Okay, nice little story, who cares? The reason we have to care is because it's the same story that can be written today, unfortunately. Imagine they're writing the history of Tafshin Pei Aleph 1,000 years from now. What would it look like? What would we look like to the future generations 1,000 years from now with the fighting and the infighting and the sinat chinam? And they'll say, whether it was in the time of the second Beit HaMikdash or the time of Tafshin Pei Aleph, it's the same thing. The Gemara also tells us, and I said this before, in many, many locations, that every generation in which the Beit HaMikdash is not rebuilt, it's as if we destroyed it. Now, does that mean that we physically destroyed it? It means we have a hand in it if we don't do the right thing. And you can't say, well, I don't have sinat chinam in me because I do this, so it's their fault. We all have some part in that. There is a tefillah. I don't remember if I mentioned this or not. There's a tefillah at the beginning of davening that is said by, it's found in Adot Mizrach Sidur. I don't think I ever saw it in Ashkenaz Sidur. And I say it every morning. It says, Harini mekabel alai mitzvah taseh shel v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. I accept upon myself the mitzvah of ahavta l'reacha kamocha. V'harini ohev et kol achad miYisrael kenafshi u'ma'odi. I love every fellow Jew as if it were my own flesh and blood, so to speak. And now I'm prepared to daven. I'm ready to daven. So there is a commentary that says a couple things. First of all, let's talk about what does that mean? That Hareini ohev et kol echad miYisrael kenafshi u'ma'odi. I love every single member of Klal Yisrael. It is very, very, very easy for me to say, I love all of you. I love all the people in Mitzpenavo. I love all the people in Ma'ale Adumim. They're all wonderful. And I love so many people in Yerushalayim. But it may not be as easy for me to say that I love the people who hate my hashkafa in life. It's Sioni, you're religious, whatever you might be, you live over the green line, you're the left-wingers. No, it's not easy to love your fellow Jew in many, many cases. It's easy to love those people that are like you, are alike to you. On Purim, we know there's a mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. Of mishloach manot. So it's mishloach manot ish levei ehu. And part of the purpose of mishloach manot is to increase ahava and love with your fellow Jew. And who do you give mishloach manot to? The people you like, right? I mean, do you give it to your enemy? Okay, so hopefully you don't have any enemies. But what you really need to do, at least to a couple people, in addition to all your friends, is to give to somebody. It's very helpful to give it to somebody who maybe you don't get along so great with. Because that increases love of Am Yisrael. I actually have in my Siddur, I wrote down a couple of generalizations of fellow Jews that I need to work on when it comes to Avat Yisrael. So when we do that, we counteract that which caused the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, and hopefully leads to the rebuilding of Beit HaMikdash. Now, speaking of rebuilding Beit HaMikdash, I'm going to take a look at a second article, an article. And this one I told you I came across in a magazine, in the weekly newsletter called Gilui Da'at. It came out right before Tisha B'Av. Obviously, there's all kinds of articles having to do with destruction of Beit HaMikdash, Sinat China, But this one caught my eye because this one also dealt with the issue or the question of where is the Aron. If you look at the depiction that we saw already a couple times, Arch of Titus, you look at this, the focus, when the first thing you see when you see the Arch of Titus, which again is taking the spoils of the Beit HaMikdash, the second Beit HaMikdash, taking them to Rome, the first thing that catches your eye is the menorah. The other thing you see, the chatzotzrot, the trumpets. If you look at it from a distance, it looks like there's an aron, but it's not. There's no aron there. If the Romans were trying to make a statement, the greatest statement they could make about the conquest of the Beit HaMikdash was to have taken the aron. Evidently, they didn't. So where is the aron? So I'm going to take a look at this article as soon as I get on screen share. Go ahead. Oh, I don't need, thank you. Here, move this down. Oh, I think I have to, I assume you cannot see right now, on top of the screen right now, do you see the word ta'alumot, mikumo sha'aron habrit? You do see that? Yes? Okay, good. Okay, good. So it did come out fine. Let me move you over. Now I'm going to start to read, again, I think a couple of weeks ago I read the introduction here, but I'm going to just read it again. Move this out of the way. So this is the introduction, the quote, the beginning of this article. Now, you know that most of us thank you very much. For the record, I bring my mom water. She doesn't bring me usually. Finally have a chance to do a little kibbutz. We live in Mitzpenavo, all of you except for Michael. that are in this on Zoom right now. And we're called Mitzpeh Nevo ostensibly because from where we are, we have a view of where Har Nevo theoretically is. I say theoretically because no one really knows. That's where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried. When you think about it, you think about the great Gedolei Yisrael, whose graves you could go to, the tzaddikim you could visit, the average person who's buried in Israel you could visit. I think that God doesn't need my approval, but I think that it was the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come into Eretz Yisrael and he had to be buried in Chutz La'aretz. The fact that we don't know where he's buried is a very good thing, because it's very likely, which is part of the reason the Chazal tell us, is that Moshe Rabbeinu's grave could have ended up almost like a, I don't know what the right word is even, but almost deifying Moshe. And which is on one hand sad that no one visits his kever. On the other hand, I think I can't imagine what that would be like. So one of the possibilities it says in this article, and we're going to see it, is Har Nevo is where the Aron is. How would it get there? Oh, the Vatican, that's the Vatican in Rome. Where is this most holy object of the Jewish people? From the time the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, by Nebuchadnezzar, which is what we just finished learning, he took with him all the utensils of the Beit HaMikdash. We don't know where the Aron was, which, by the way, from this introductory sentence, you can already see that the second Beit HaMikdash evidently didn't have an Aron, or at least it didn't have the original. Let's see. בפסוקים של הכלים, אותם לקח המלך עמו לבבל, נשמת אהרון. When we look back at Perek Kaf-Hey, the last chapter that we did in Sefer Melachim, and it lists all the different things. I purposely didn't point it out because I wanted to actually get to this, and then I found this article. It doesn't mention anything about the Aron. It tells us about the other utensils. I'll make this a little bit bigger, see if I can. Okay. אז, החל המדע הארכיאולוגיה בחיפושיו הנרחבים, I'm going to read kind of quickly and I'll translate. אחר חיפוש, ארכיאולוגיה בחיפושיו הנרחבים אחר אוצרות מן העבר הרחוק ומתקופת המקרא, עמדה תמיד השאלה הגדולה מכולן. Among all the different archaeological seeking out and digs and everything else, the one overarching question seems to have always been, היכן נמצא החפץ הקדוש ביותר? Where is the most holy object? Shunach b'makom hakadosh biyoter, that stood in the most holy location, Aron HaBrit. If you never know, I'm going to put a mark here so I know where I am. If you never noticed, Yom Kippur brings together one day a year the confluence of three things: the holiest place, Beit HaMikdash Kodesh Kodashim, the holiest day, that's time. So we have place and time, the holiest day, Yom Kippur, and the holiest person, who was the Kohen Gadol, all come together once a year on Yom Kippur. So that Aron Brit Hashem, that Ark of the Covenant, where is it? Aron shenivneh bimei Moshe, v'lo zer zahav saviv, v'lo, it had a gold crown around it, ubal kuruvim shesochachim milamala, hayabal sgulot piliyot. We know that the Aron had secret, almost magical, and I use that word very loosely in term, power. Remember, the first time we encountered the Aron was when Am Yisrael, we didn't, but in Sefer Yoshua, when Am Yisrael crossed the Jordan River, not far from Mitzpeh Nevo, by the way, and crossed into Israel, and the Aron was to straighten out the land so they would be able to travel properly. Where we came across it was the beginning of Sefer Shmuel many, many years ago, when it was taken into captivity, when our dear friends Chofni and Pinchas took the Aron. ברחבי התנ"ך מסופר כי מכוחו נבקעו מימי הירדן בכניסת עם ישראל לארץ כנען, הוא גרם מספר פעמים למיתה כמו במקרה של אנשי בית שמש, וכן בסיפור עוזה. We've learned these stories, these narratives, where we saw the power of the of the Aron, which in one case, which I just mentioned, helped the Am Yisrael conquer Eretz Canaan, and also that caused the death of the people in Beit Shemesh. Remember, they peeked inside, and Uzzah, when the Aron slipped off apparently slip off the wagon, he grabbed it and died. Aron, bo hayu munachim shivrei haluchot, tzintzenet haman umatem Moshe. The Aron had inside of it more than just the luchot. It had the broken luchot, it had the jar of man, and Moshe Rabbeinu's staff. היה בשימוש ביום הכיפורים כאשר בין בדיו היה מקריב הכהן הגדול אחת בשנה את הקטורת בשעה בה נכנס לקודש הקודשים ונשא תפילה לשלומן של עם ישראל. That played a central role in the day of Yom Kippur when the Kohen Gadol would stand between the two poles of the Aron and offer up the Ketoret on that day in a prayer for Am Yisrael. משעה שהוחרב בית המקדש הראשון על ידי נבוכדנצר מלך בבל. When the time the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Bavel, אשר נטל עמו את כלי המקדש, לא נדע היכן הארון. This is the introductory sentence, I read it already. We don't know where the Aron is. בין הרשימה מוזכרת בפסוקים של הכלים, אותם לקח, I read this already above. It doesn't say where it was. It wasn't included in the list of things taken by Nebuchadnezzar. במידה ואכן הוא נלקח, if it was taken, lo mina higayon shu lo yuzkar. It makes no sense. Now you can say, okay, they just didn't list it. But that wouldn't make any sense to not list the Aron, which would be the cream of the crop of all the utensils they could have taken from Beit HaMikdash. V'lachein, therefore, yesh laniach ki hu lo nilkach b'shalal kishar klei HaMikdash. It would seem to make sense that it was not taken with all the rest of the stuff that was taken from the Beit HaMikdash. And I use the word stuff, that's really not the right word, because you're talking about the holiest utensils in the world. So I will not say the word stuff. השערה זו מתחזקת לנוכח הרשימה המתארת את הכלים. This assumption gains more tread, so to speak, when we see that it's not listed in the kelim. שהחזיר כורש מלך פרס לבני ישראל שנים לאחר מכן, כשנבנה בית המקדש השני. We were going to learn, Bezrat Hashem will learn after doing Eicha, and we'll learn about Koresh and the permission given to the Jews to return to Am Yisrael. He says, okay, take these utensils. The Aron's not mentioned there either. In the list of the utensils that Bnei Yisrael take back to Israel, the Aron's not mentioned. As a result of this, we know the second Beit HaMikdash did not have an Aron. Now, before I even continue, we have to understand something. When we say, when we daven and we say Shemona Esrei, we ask for the Dvir, right? Dvir Beiteno, right? And by Modim. Talk about the Dvir. The first Beit HaMikdash was known as the Dvir, not the second one. The second Beit HaMikdash was a much smaller version of the first. Even though Herod eventually destroys it, purposely takes it apart and then rebuilds a more beautiful one. The second Beit HaMikdash, I don't want to say it was teeny. It was small. It didn't have most of the kelim. And also, if you look in Pirkei Avot, there are miracles that took place in the first Beit HaMikdash that didn't happen in the second. So we cannot, we should not think in our minds that the first and second Beit HaMikdash were the same thing. They were very, very, very different. Same kedusha, same everything, but lacking a lot. If you had, it says, we're going to see when we learn Sefer Ezra, that when they built the second Beit HaMikdash, the elders cried and the children were happy. The elders cried because they knew what the first Beit HaMikdash looked like. They saw all its letifartot, all its beauty and glory. So they felt bad because it's not the same thing. It's version 2.0. But for the children who had never been, who grew up in Galut and now are coming back to Israel, coming to Israel, to them it was fantastic. And that's why they were joyous. So we have to make sure that we understand that there was a very significant difference between the first and the second Beit HaMikdash. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Chazal. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some different possibilities where the Aron might be. And this one here is the one that has what I would think is the most commonly held opinion, I think. Now, I'm nobody, but this is my opinion as well, based on the little bit I've learned about it. Chazal say that the Aron is actually somewhere underneath where Har HaBayit is. In other words, if right now we were to be able not to be stupid enough to leave the most important part of Israel in the hands of our enemies, if we were not that stupid and we could actually go and do what we wanted, and we did an archaeological dig under Har HaBayit, in theory, we should be able to find the Aron and the underneath the ground of Har HaBayit. How do we know that? I mean, it's a nice thought, but how do we know it? There are hints throughout Tanakh as to where the location is of the Aron. One of the psukim is in Divrei Yamim, that not only was the Aron not taken into as part of the spoils into Bavel, but well before the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, that Yoshiyahu HaMelech already took it and buried it under the ground. Where does it say? It says in Divrei Yamim, Vayomer leleviim hamevinim lechol Yisrael hakadoshim laHashem tenu et Aron hakodesh babayit asher bana Shlomo ben David melech Yisrael ein lechem masa bekatef ata ibdu et Hashem Elokeichem et amo Yisrael. He was telling at the time of Yoshiyahu, we see that already he's saying to the Leviim, you no longer need to carry this Aron because it's going to be in a different location. 1 second here. Okay. Because of that pasuk, Chazal evinu shetnu et Aron HaKodesh babayit, when it says place the Aron HaKodesh in the house, chayav lihiyot geniza b'mechilot mitachat labayit. It meant to be buried somewhere under Har HaBayit. What do you mean put it in the bayit? It was in the bayit, but it meant to hide it somewhere. Umi genazo, who hid it? Yoshiyahu genazo. Yoshiyahu did. Ma ra'ashe genazo. Why? What did he see that made him do it? Ra'ashe katuv, he saw a pasuk in Dvarim that said, Yolech Hashem otcha v'et malkecha asher takim alecha amad v'nignaz. Klomar, yeshno kan tzad milchamti. There is a military step. Lifnei shehaoyev yagia el Beit Hamikdash. Before the enemy would arrive at the Beit Hamikdash, v'yirtzeh bevadai lasim et yado al Aron, and for sure the enemy would want to take the Aron. Yoshiyahu mitzaveh lignoz oto. Yoshiyahu commands them to hide it. Let's put it into a different perspective for a minute. Let's assume for a moment you're living in a neighborhood and suddenly your neighborhood is under attack. You know they're coming. They're coming, going to go house to house. I'm not looking for answers. It's a rhetorical question. Think about those items that you could not take with you when you run. What would you want to hide? What would you want to protect? What would be the most important thing for you to save in that kind of a situation? And in that situation, this is exactly what Yoshiyahu does, is he takes the Aron, Brit Hashem, and he buries it so it doesn't fall into the hands of the Babylonians. The Mishnah B'Masechet Shkalim, there's a very actually famous story that some of you may know. It's a Mishnah in Masechet Shkalim. It tells a story. There's a Kohen who was working in the Beit HaMikdash, the second Beit HaMikdash. And he saw that somewhere on the floor of the Beit HaMikdash that there was like a block or something. The floor wasn't exactly normal. It was something off. And he went and he told his friend. Though he he didn't have the opportunity to even finish what he was saying, and he suddenly died. Shisham Ha'aron Ganuz, and they knew for certain that had to be the place where the Aron was buried. This is a Mishnah. This isn't a fable. It's not a Midrash. This is a Mishnah. Gama Rambam Kote Ki Be'et Shebana Shlomo HaMelech et Beit HaMikdash. Even the Rambam says that even at the time when Shlomo originally built the Beit HaMikdash, Yada Shesofo Lehicharev, he knew it was eventually going to be destroyed. Therefore, Banabo is the quote from the Rambam. Bana bo bait lignoz bo ha'aron lemata b'matmoniot amukot. When Shlomo built the Beit HaMikdash, and this is not recorded in the Tanakh, Rambam says that along with the rest of the building, he also built a hiding place underneath Har HaBayit. So that place is where Shlomo HaMelech then had made the spot, and that's where Yoshio commanded for it to be buried. That's the first opinion. Now, before I continue, I'll tell you a story that some of you may know, but you may not know. That I'm going to tell you the story anyways. In Hebron, we know it's Marat HaMachpelah. There's Adam and Chava, Avram and Sarah. We know our Avot, Imahot, except for Rachel, are buried there. And there's a man whose name is Simcha Hachbam. Who is he? So he's a first cousin, for those of you who know Rivka Rina Maltz. He's her first cousin. She's a Hachbam. And he has been living in Hebron for many, 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 many years. And he gives tours to people who come to Hebron. And I went on a few of his tours. He's absolutely magnificent. He's great because every time you hear him, it's like he's giving the story for the first time. Now, the story I'm about to tell you, I heard many times, and then I heard him tell the story in his home, and you'll see why I'm mentioning it. There's a boy who was about, I think it was 7 or 8 years old, who was autistic, who had never spoken a single word, who was in Marat HaMachpelah with his family, who broke away from his family. He started to walk around, and he found this little hole, a slot, something, and he slid down. He went into the slot, and all of a sudden he starts yelling, "Po, or, here, there's light, po." He kept screaming it over as the first words he ever said. It turns out, and I heard the story many times, that this was actually Simcha Hachbam's son. So it's not one of those, I heard that it was his son. He said it was the first 2 words he said in his entire life. And we believe, and where he went down is believed to be directly above the area where we believe Avraham Avinu was buried. So we don't know, we don't understand all these unbelievable things that happen in this world. But that's, as I say, as Gemara's expression is, "B'didi have uvda." This happened to me, not to me personally, but to the person who it happened to. It was his son. This is not one of those fables that the Chafetz Chaim said about the No, this is tachlis that happened to somebody. So what's on the surface of something, we don't always know what's going on. It's actually a great mashal for life. We see a person, they seem to be doing great in life, but you never know what's going on below the surface. Someone once told me there's something called the theory of the duck. You ever watch a duck go across the water? Nice and serene, right? Goes across the water. But what's happening below the surface? It's paddling like crazy, right? Trying to keep moving along. So sometimes on the surface, we see one thing, but below the surface, there's something else. So according to the Mishnah, according to other opinions, the Aron is actually buried below the surface of Har Habayit. Okay, here we have Rav Getz, the Haminara Sodit. Rav Getz, who was the Rav of the Kotel, he was Nuriel Getz's grandfather, I believe, correct? Not father, it's his grandfather, Nachon? For those of you who remember. For those of you who remember Nuriel Getz, Alav Hashalom, who used to live in our neighborhood, who suddenly passed away at a very young age, just a few years ago. At least it seems like a few years. Here's what he says. Al smach dvarim elu shel Chazal, based on these words of Chazal. Alfei shanim lachar mikam b'medinat Yisrael shel shnat. Listen what Rav Getz did. It's unbelievable. In 1982, Yinaseh Mukubal Rav Meir Getz Zatzal, Rav HaKotel, lagia laron al yedei chafirat minara b'tochei Har Habayit. I said, it'd be nice if we could. He actually tried to secretly dig under Har Habayit in 1982. It was a very complicated operation. Obviously, he had to keep it very quiet. It had to be done secretly. Over a period of a number of weeks, a tunnel was dug, the Kivun Kodesh HaKodashim, in the direction of the Holy of Holies. The Besof at the end, at the moment they almost got underneath the area where it should have been, the Arabs discovered the tunnel. So obviously, in typical Arab fashion, they started rioting, and that was the end of that dig. So what did the government do? They had the opening to that tunnel sealed with cement. Because of that, Rav Getz wrote in his diary, I'm going to go to my next world with a bitter taste in my mouth. I never felt the lowliness of how we can go as a people like I do today. And this is in our land where we have sovereignty. I pray that this is the end of the galut. מנוע מלגלות סודות אפילו באמצעות יומן זה, לכן אינני מגיב ואינני משיב לכל פי דבר. He says, I'm not going to tell anybody where this was, where this is. I'm not going to forget it. We're done. Story, end the story. Next one, I'm jumping down to here. Another possibility is that the Aron is in Har Nevo. Of all the places on earth, that's probably maybe one of the stranger ones to say that it's in Har Nevo where Moshe Rabbeinu is. And what would it be based on? Some say that the Aron is actually found on the mountain upon which Moshe Rabbeinu died. But Sefer Maccabim Bet is part of what's called the, let's say Hagiography, the
Apocrypha.
What?
Apocrypha.
Apocrypha. I knew it didn't sound right. The Apocrypha. So you can find this in many books, many Sfarim. So Sefer Maccabim Bet says, Misupar, כיצד הנביא ירמיהו טמן את הארון במערה על הר נבו, כדי להסתירו מידי הבבלים. That Yirmiyahu, according to Sefer Maccabim, Yirmiyahu took the Aron, somehow found his way to take it to Har Nevo, and bury it there so the Bavlim could not take it. במשך השנים ניסו מספר אנשים להגיע להר, שנחשב לפי הערכות כהר נבו, והחלו לחפור בו. Over the years, there have been people who tried where they estimate where Har Nevo is to try to dig there. אחד מהם, ארכיאולוג בשם אנטוניה פרדריק, פוטרר, הגיע בשנות ה-20 של המאה הקודמת אל ההר והחל לחפור בו. So this archaeologist got there in the 20th century, the 1920s, and started to dig there. הוא טען כי מצא שם מנהרה סודית. He claims he found a secret tunnel. שהייתה חסומה בידי קיר, that was closed off by a wall. ולמה לקיר הייתה כתובה כתומה שאותה העתיק, and there was something ancient written on the wall, he copied it, ולקח לירושלים לפי ענוח, and he took it for to be deciphered in ירושלים. לטענתו, הכתובה הייתה, הכתובת הייתה, what did it say? כאן נמצא ארון הזהב של הברית. He claims that what was written on that wall in ancient script was, here is where the golden Aron is to be found. בעקבותיו יצא לחיפוש בהר הרפתקן אמריקני בשם טאם קרוסטר, שניסה אף הוא לאתר את המקום. As a result of that, this adventurer, Tom Kroster, tried to locate this place. קרוסטר טען שהשיג ניירות של פוטר, ובהם מפה של אותו נתיב סודי בהר נבו. He claimed that he found the map for this. Okay, but they didn't find anything. Let's go down. Now, this is probably one of the more believed opinions in the world, is that the Aron is in the Vatican. Now, I know people who visited the Vatican. I know people who claim that the tzitz is there, the tzitz that was on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. People claim that the original menorah is there. I don't know anyone who's ever seen any of these things. I don't know. Maybe they're there, maybe they're not. And if they're there, why won't they let us see it? Maybe because it shows that we are right. I don't know. In any case, so this is, I'm not reading this whole thing, just a little bit more here. It says, Bigmara ba yeshno diun al mikumo sharon, umva'od shalosh deot shonot. Shnai mehem goreset ki Aron nitman b'mechilot harabayit l'umata. I'm going to read this and I'll explain. דאחר דת רבי אליעזר סובר כי נבוכדנצר הצליח לקחת את ארון עמו לבבל, לקח שלט את דעה זו. Okay, so the Gemara, we mentioned this before. The Gemara has different opinions as to where the Aron might be. בעקבות דעה זו בגמרא, יש שמניחים כי ארון יחד עם כלי המקדש נוספים, מונח במרתפי הוותיקן ברומא. Because Rabbi Eliezer in the Gemara says that also the Aron was taken to Rome. Remember, this is the time of the Gemara talking. That there are those who say that in the cellars, the basements of the Vatican is where the Aron is. Lifnei arba'a esrei shanim, 14 years ago, הייתה הזדמנות נדירה לאחד מן אנשי מכון המקדש, מיכאל אליבום. Now, if you're not familiar with Machon HaMikdash, you need to be. You go into the old city, Machon HaMikdash has rebuilt many of the utensils of Beit HaMikdash when Ben-Hera B'Yameinu was rebuilt. They have clothing for Kohen Gadol. They have chatzot zrot, which they used at the Kotel. They used to, at least on Rosh Chodesh. All kinds of things. The menorah that you see going down to the stairs to now it's in the plaza of the Rova. All these things were done by Machon HaMikdash. So evidently, 14 years ago, someone named Michael Elbam from Machon HaMikdash had a chance. The Otot et Otama Kelim evidently saw some of these utensils by the Vatican. ומספר כי שר הפנים האיטלקי לשעבר אמר לעמיתו היהודי כי ראה את מנורת המקדש בביקור שערך במרתפי הוותיקן. Evidently, he said that the interior minister, the Italian interior minister, said to his Jewish counterpart that he himself had seen the Aron. היהודי המומר יצר קשר עם גורמים ישראלים, והוחלט לשלוח אותו אל המשימה. So because of that, they said, okay, maybe we should send someone Jewish to take a look at it. When this man came, this guy from Israel came to the Vatican, גרמה אמירה מיותרת של אחד הנוכחים להפסקת הביקור, בסוף הם לא הצליחו לראות את המנורה, את כלי המקדש אבודים. Somehow, to kind of encapsulate that statement, there was some backroom politicking. It's not exactly what it says, and they prevented the guy from going to the Vatican to see anything. Avram Menachem Mikubar, ראש ארגון והרינו בבניינו, שעוסק באופן תמידי בנושאים אלו שהר הבית בית המקדש, טועה. בשיחה עמו, כי למרות הדעות השונות שקיימות בנוגע למיקומו, he says, in spite of all the different opinions as to where the Aron is, לדעתו ארון נמצא במחילות הר הבית. He believes that it's underneath the הר הבית. הוא מסביר זאת בכך שהרמב"ם פסק זאת בהלכות בית הבחירה באופן ודאי. He says not only do we have a hint to it, the Rambam pretty much strictly makes a statement that is in Hilchot Beit HaBechira, which is the halachot of Beit HaMikdash, כשכתב שארון נמצא במטמוניות על כלכלות, במעמקי הר הבית, וגם כשתיאר את שאר הכלים שיש לבנות בבית המקדש השלישי, הוא לא תיאר את בניית הארון לעתיד לבוא, בגלל שהוא סובר כי הארון יתגלה. Listen to this statement. If you look at the Rambam, Hilchot Beit HaBechira, you will see the Rambam describes the building of all the utensils for the Beit HaMikdash HaShlishi, except for the Aron. Why? Because he says it's under Har HaBayit. It's there. It's going to be revealed at that time. And now it goes into all these different questions about why do you think it's hidden? No, but I'm not going to get into that. So the point for this whole thing, this whole article was 3,330 years ago, we received the Torah. Sorry, 3,333 years was Matan Torah. The first Beit HaMikdash is destroyed in 586 BCE. The second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed in 70 CE of the Common Era. And yes, we say we have Shiva Sabbat Tammuz and Asar B'Tevet and Tzom Gedalia and Tisha B'Av. It's still part of our past, we think. It's ancient, literally ancient history. And it takes a lot of effort to try to bring ancient history into your life today. When we say Shmona Esrei, when we say about Binyan Yerushalayim, we say when we bench Bonei Barach Yerushalayim, we have to understand what we're talking about. We have to understand that which we have been trying to reestablish for almost 2,000 years is within our capability. The statement, which was true for about 45 minutes, Har HaBayit Bi'adenu, don't get me started, I would look at it a different way. Har HaBayit Bi'adenu, which in my personal opinion means that it's in our hands, it's in our ability that we can have Har HaBayit with the Beit HaMikdash again. It's up to you and me. It's not up to this guy or that, it's up to every one of us who's listening and everyone who will hear this tape and anyone who else was going to listen, because we have something that's ready for us already. It says that the Beit HaMikdash is going to come, part of it's going to come down from Shemayim, and who knows? As the Rambam himself says, no one knows if this stuff is going to happen like this or not, because no one's seen it. As the Rambam himself says, this is what we think will happen in Yimot HaMashiach, this is what we think Mashiach is going to do, but we don't know. But what we do know is we believe is through Emunah Shlema that we are going to have a new Beit HaMikdash. We are going to have Mashiach. We are going to have all this. But it's up to us to really be able to say, that it's in our hands to be able to see to this will come to fruition. Next Sunday, Bezrat Hashem, I will be in transit. So there will be no class. And Bezrat Hashem, the Sunday after that, I'm not sure what's going to happen yet. We're going to transition soon. I'm not sure which week yet. I might need a little bit of time to do proper preparation for Eicha. We will probably spend, my guess is about 4 months on Eicha, maybe a little less, a little bit more, pachot yoter, something like that. Eicha is different from absolutely every other sefer in Tanakh, radically different. We're going to learn the background to why. We're going to go into some of the psukim and not necessarily read every single pasuk. And the reason for doing that is we could transition right into, okay, let's go to Ezra Nehemiah. Okay, Koresh says, go ahead, Jews, go rebuild. We'll jump 7 years into history, go back and build your Beit HaMikdash. But I think we're going to still miss something. I think it's important for us to still, quote, mourn the loss of the Beit HaMikdash within the class before we go back to the next stage of the rebuilding. So in the meantime, I wish you all a Shavua Tov. For those of you who need to go to Marv, I know on the street, I think it's by in front of our building, it's at 8, so it's in 10 minutes. I haven't even eaten lunch yet, so that's
Rabbi,
yes, Aryeh.
I'd like to say something crazy. Once, about 15 years ago, I worked for some American rabbi who moved to Israel. While straightening out his kitchen, he claimed that there is another Beit HaMikdash built in Yerushalayim buried. He claimed, I think he's from New Jersey or something like that, elderly rabbi. He claimed he's got permission to dig and he's trying to find it. And he tried to show it to me in Pesukim why before they destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash, there was another one already built somewhere. I know it's crazy. I don't
It's not correct. Look, first I can't say it's not true or it is true. I have no idea, but the fact I've never heard doesn't mean anything. But I've never read an article like that. If you ever have any way to find out what he's referring
I only
to.
worked for him once. I don't know who, I don't remember his name.
Okay. Because I'd love to hear what that's all about. I've never seen that anywhere. I would tell you that if there's truth to that, or validity, I shouldn't say truth, they would know about it at Machon HaMikdash. That'd be my first stop. If I'm in the old city and they're open, I would actually stop. And I could ask Rabbi Richmond. I don't know him personally. I know his wife. Rabbi Richmond is the director of the institute.
I know he is.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know him myself. I know his wife. I've talked to her multiple times. So maybe I can find out. That's interesting. But the whole idea of where these things are and what we'll find out. We'll find out right when I get back to Israel, I hope.
Okay.
Rabbi Shannon, just one question.
Sure.
I remember, I don't know from where, what the source is, but I think it was said that the Romans, after the destruction of the second temple, were laughing at the Jews because of the Kruvim, and they said, here, the Jews are going against idol worship and they've got their own idols. Do you remember something like that?
I don't. I just remember the discussion of how is it that Hashem can say you cannot make a graven image, and in the holiest place there's a graven image. Yeah, that I've seen.
Well, I remember this was like the mockery of the Romans, and it was specifically the second temple. So my question was, if there was no Aaron, which is also clear to me from many years now, there was no Aaron in the second temple, where were the Kruvim?
So I will. No, the Kruvim are part of the part of the top of the Aron.
Okay, they're part of the kapoet. Sorry, the kapoet, the lid of the.
Right.
So if there was no Aron, there was no Kruvim. So.
Correct. So I would tell you, I have a very simple answer. I think. Do you know that there was Kruvim? I know there were Kruvim. I know there's Aron. Did I ever see it? No. I mean, they have heard about it too. Just doesn't mean they have to see it. Maybe.
But if Yoshiyahu had already buried it before the first destruction of the first temple, Rome didn't even exist then.
Correct.
Why would the Romans have heard of it?
Correct. However, again, there are things that didn't exist at the time, let's say the first Beit HaMikdash, that later in history they could have heard of and used against the Jews or whatever.
The whole story about this mockery was that they were surprised to find them.
Oh, so then I don't know. If you find a source, send it to me. I'll take a look. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Mrs. Shendel, thank you for lending us your son.
So thank you for lending her your son.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
He loves all you guys. He really
most of
Oh.
you. Then there's Danny.
That
does.
reminds
don't
me,
make fun of Danny.
Rabbi,
We love Danny.
Rabbi,
Yes, we do. We do. All right.
if you said
Bye-bye.
that your mother could live once in 85 years, does that mean that in addition to us being the same age, our mothers are also the same age?
Yes,
Because my mother is
yes,
85.
yes.
Wow.
It does mean that. Wild. I
Wow.
know. Actually, my mom
Okay.
came 10 years to my Navi class here in Chicago. So
Oh,
this
yeah.
is review for her, I guess.
So this is a review, right?
Right, right. So,
Uh,
so
very
have a
good.
great evening,
Okay.
everybody. Good to see
All
y'all.
right, that's all.
Bye.
Have a good
Yeah,
day.
so-
Bye.